We have spent a lot of time on the show reminding listeners to get their bike checked out and freshened up for race day. But what we should really be saying is to get your bike freshened up days or maybe a week or 2 weeks before race day.
Now, Hottie, I would say we've crossed the threshold from reminding into haranguing territory. But when we say freshened up, what we mean is to go to the Shimano website, look over the replacement parts, and ask yourself, when was the last time I replaced my chain or my cables or my brake pads? And if it's been a while or you can't remember when, maybe it is a good idea to replace them just to make sure.
As far as timing goes, like we said, have those fresh parts on a week or more out from race day is really a good idea. Take brake pads, for instance. I like to get those new pads bedded in and get a little wear on them before a race. That way, there's no doubt once the shotgun is fired. And if there is an issue with some new part, or maybe that new part reveals a new problem, well, then you have time to act on it.
Yeah, great advice there. So while there is still time, take inventory of your machine, figure out what needs freshening up, and grab some genuine replacement parts from Shimano. Cables, brake pads, chains, rotors, all of it is at bike.shimano.com. And thanks so much to Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Shimano. It is Season 6, Episode 23 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Hotton, Hottie to most.
And I am Fatty, and I have finished 24 Leadville Trail 100s. While I have used power, meaning power on a power meter to help me get ready, I've never raced the thing with a power meter. For years, I believed that the power numbers at altitude were unreliable. And not only that, frankly, I just like racing by feel. And feel has served me pretty well.
I too raced the 100, power meter less. And to be very fair, Fatty, power meters on mountain bikes were rare when I started and non-existent when you first took the line. That has certainly changed. And while Fatty and I still do not have power meters on our mountain bikes, we know many of you do. So in this episode, we want to help you get it right when it comes to racing with a power meter at high elevation. A warning, though, with this episode, there is some math involved.
What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
Facts, Leadville frequently asked questions, rolls on. Here's one off our Slack channel, leadville.fm/Slack, from Derek Bradford. He says, I'm coming from sea level and arriving in Leadville on Wednesday, which I'm finding out may be the worst day from an elevation acclimatization standpoint. I have already bought an airline ticket and VRBO from Wednesday to Monday, so I can't really change the plans in that way. Would it possibly be beneficial to leave Leadville on Thursday, go back down to Denver, and stay the night there, and then come back up on Friday? I'm willing to eat the hotel fee if it will really prove beneficial. Any thoughts would be appreciated. Fatty, this may be a case of overthinking, but how have you handled your arrival times, and how have they varied over the years? And what would you tell Derek?
Well, when this race began, when this race was young, none of us knew anything about altitude acclimation. For my first several years, I would go to Leadville, stay at the Delaware Inn, and I would get there either Wednesday or Thursday. And I was thinking that I was doing my body good, not sabotaging myself. Now, of course, nowadays we know a little bit better. And I come to Leadville 10 days before if my PTO cash is, will allow it. But I have a job and limited PTO. I'm like a normal person, right? So in general, and like this week, this year, I'm coming a week before. But I'm not a great, role model on this because I live at 5,000 feet. People need to know. And I very frequently do my rides that peak out at 8 or even 10,000 feet. So, I'm no stranger to Leadville-like altitudes. Now, so if you're a sea level, if you're a flatlander or a sea level person, you're going to have a little bit more of a challenge. But I would say, regardless, the idea of going back to Denver and then commuting back to Leadville is going to do you more harm than good. That's time in the car, which means your legs are down, and that's not good quality rest time. Come to Leadville instead. Do the best you can to rest. Just stay on your back, legs up. Watch a lot of Netflix. Big fan of the new Hijack series. Watch all of that. Elevation is a key component of this race, but I think fatigue is even more key.
Yeah, and that 70 freeway back and forth to Denver, it can be a nightmare. Like, you can waste hours out there on that thing, even in the summertime. So
stress you out.
Be advised using that thing. My first time was also a Wednesday arrival, Derek. I'm a sea level dweller. I'll have to say, I was in very, very good shape my first time out. So the elevation didn't really grab me by the ears. And some of that, again, was condition. I think I was also very hyped up to be there, so I didn't really let it knock me down. Had a good race. I never really felt fatigued until afterwards. And so I think Wednesday's fine. I mean, I think you'll be fine. In fact, there's some science that says come as late as you can. If you can't be there for a month or two, show up Thursday or Friday. That's really your best bet. Before your body has a chance to get too fatigued, you're going to get fatigued. Like, you show up at 10,000 feet, it's going to hit most people. It starts eating away at you. So I think you're fine with Wednesday, Dirk. Don't overthink that. The other times I've shown up, I've been 6 or 7 days in advance, kind of a mini vacation. It certainly didn't do me any better than showing up midweek. Probably worse, in fact. I just more time at altitude from a person who lives at sea level. So, Derek, go with confidence. You've got a little plan. You're going to be there on Wednesday. Get there. Get your number plate. Take it as easy as you can. I think you'll be fine. Hey, Fatty, we got time. Let's do a second LFAQ here. Frank Mendez on the Facebook page asks, what is the best breakfast for the morning of the race?
We should do a whole episode on that.
We can. Now, I've done a lot of things with you at the Trail 100, but breakfast is not one of them. So what's on the menu?
Okay, so I just personally don't think you can beat a breakfast burrito. Lots of eggs, lots of cheese, lots of bacon, lots of chopped up tomatoes, lots of onion, lots of mushroom. I skip the salsa on race day, though salsa doesn't bother me any of the other 364 days of the year. It's strictly superstition. Now, it is worth noting that I eat eggs practically every day, and a breakfast burrito before every big weekend ride. And I think that is really the real key. I'm doing what I always do. Don't eat anything brand new on race day. If you've never had a scrambled egg burrito, don't eat one because I like them. Eat whatever you've been eating before all of your big rides.
I have and continue to eat steel-cut oats frequently. Bacon and pancakes, also a favorite, and I've made those at Leadville. Cooking is always a little bit of a struggle at Leadville, but I have cranked those out on race morning, both for myself and for my team, in fact. So steel-cut oats and oatmeal in general is kind of a go-to. You just hear a lot of riders say that. But after talking to Ellen Lim this season, Fatty, I think I would change it up. And I'd go with rice and a little egg. I think a breakfast burrito stuffed full of eggs is a bit much. Carbs are king with this thing, with the Leadville Trail 100. So I would probably do a big heaping bowl of rice and an egg or two over the top. Maybe some toast or maybe something sweet to help get things going. That bacon, bacon, food is mood. I do love the bacon. So a piece of bacon's not going to kill you, but I'd like to try rice. Very easy to digest, instant energy carb. I think you'll notice, we're recording this during the Tour de France. Those racers on the Tour de France are going through kilos of rice because it just works.
Yeah, I'm going to mix rice into my breakfast burrito. And you have to understand, I'm not talking, little 4-inch diameter tortilla shell here. We are talking something on the magnitude of more of like a Frisbee-sized burrito. I'm getting plenty of carbs. Plus, and I think this is more important than what I have for breakfast, that I'm eating some carbs on the starting line. I am, while I am waiting for the gun, I am eating. I am getting 250 calories before, right before the gun goes off.
Speaking of breakfast, did you know our friends at The Feed have a whole page dedicated to the first meal of the day?
Yeah. If slow cooking oats or flipping pancakes or firing up the rice cooker is something you're not really into on race morning, then look to The Feed to get your day carved up and fired up. The easy items are the Insta cup of oats and the granola. That kind of breakfast comes out faster than you can say Columbine. Add water to the oats, nuke the milk and add it to the granola, soak it for a few, grab a spoon, begin fueling.
A lot of people have nervous gut on the race morning, and the thought of taking in anything solid seems just awful. But man, you got to try to get something down. For those racers, The Feed has superfood shakes. A smoothie was Rebecca Rush's go-to. Just remember, your breakfast shake may not have the carb count of a bowl of oats or a stack of pancakes, so you need to get on your eating right after the start.
Yeah, anything is better than nothing. I remember one year a guy who was just so nervous, he barely got through half a bowl of cornflakes. He did not finish the race. So it's start early and get up early, eat something, have your coffee in early while it's time for, it has time to do its thing. It's a challenge, right? But you got to get something in. And that is why The Feed has laid out several great options on the breakfast page of its website.
Breakfast, it's my favorite meal, but it's not everyone's. Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first Feed credit of $20 right away.
Let's do one more question, Hottie. I've been getting this on our Slack channel as well as on Facebook. Are we going to be doing a group ride like we have for the last couple of years? Now, I have been kind of sick because of a surgery, and so I haven't wanted to commit, but the answer is yes, which means good things about how I feel. I'm not going to say exactly when yet, but we will be having more information on that soon. But yes, plan to ride with us.
We look forward to seeing all of you on your bikes in Leadville. Fatty, I got a message from a Leadville racer the other day. He said he had destroyed a race wheel, and he was asking about Envy's Foundation Series mountain bike wheels and the M6s, and if he was asking if the M6s would be a step up from the Foundation wheels. By the way, the wheel he broke was not an Envy wheel.
Oh, well, I mean, regardless of what it is, sorry for your loss. Now's kind of a bad time to have to be making a change. What did you tell him?
Without hesitation, I told him he should be on the M5s. The AM30, the Foundation Series wheel set that is perfectly fine if you are trying to save a few bucks and you're on a trail bike. Same for the M6. Technically a trail cross-country wheel set with the M-Series engineering, layup, and price tag. It'll do fine at Leadville, but that's not what Envy designed the M6 for.
Yeah, M5 all the way. It is the climbiest wheel that Envy makes for mountain bikes. It takes a tire about as big as you want to run at Leadville, at 2.4. And compared to the other two mentioned, the M5s will offer more comfort. If I thought the M6 wheel set would do better, I would be using it. But the M5 is just tailor-made for the Leadville 100. Lisa and I will both be on M5s this year. I, of course, have a deal with Envy. Lisa does not. So you could say we put our money where our mouths are.
And that's what I told this listener. I don't think it's the answer he wanted to hear, but it was the correct one. Check out the Envy M5 wheel set at Envy, that's ENVE.com.
I know it's pretty amazing to read the Leadville discussions when it comes to training goals. We used to talk in terms of mileage or hours on the bike or the amount of climbing and heart rate zones. That has largely been traded for normalized power, FTP, or watts per kilogram. The power meter has become the real go-to tool for getting in race shape.
It has also become the tool many, if not most, racers have on their mountain bikes. In real time and in races, a rider can precisely hit their target power and use it to pace to victory. But like a lot of things, Leadville and its elevation throws a wrench into that. Still, there is a way to use a power meter at altitude and get accurate readings. For help, we turn to an expert in power and training and someone who has skillfully used a power meter in the Leadville 100. Coach Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad is back to share his racing with a power meter wisdom. Okay, we're here with Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad. Jonathan, you're like a TrainerRoad OG, right? You've been there since the beginning of that thing?
Darn near, yeah. Since it was just like 3 of us, and now it's 92 employees. It's just amazing. It's awesome.
92 employees. Whoa.
Yep, it's pretty great. And we're still bootstrapped. We don't have investors or anything. We just, we just grow as we grow, which I hope that makes sense. It sounds silly to say the same word twice, but hope it makes sense. So
yeah, we'll love that. And we love your content too, by the way. I was telling Jonathan before we started recording, I just listened to their show, their podcast, the TrainerRoad podcast, the S Cycling Coach podcast, and I rip off ideas because they're that good. So folks, if you want a deeper dive on like...
No, we don't.
No, we don't. On the stuff we cover here, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, I couldn't recommend it more. It's really a good one to kind of supplement your Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike podcast content. Now we have Jonathan here because Jonathan, you're talking right now to 2 dinosaurs. Fatty and I, man, we know what power meters are, and I've ridden with a power meter before, and I'm sure Fatty has, and obviously we have
got one on my road bike.
We have them on our trainers. I have a smart trainer. I'm not that bad. But as far as Leadville is concerned, like, I always did it without a power meter. I'm pretty sure Fatty never has run power.
Never have.
At the Leadville Trail 100. And we've always told, like we said in our setup, that, man, we've told people on this show in the past, just leave the power meter at home or turn off that screen on your head unit or whatever, because power is just going to lie to you at Leadville. But we also know this, that people are showing up to that race with power meters on, and they're going to want to look at that stuff and maybe want to race with it. So we brought Jonathan here to tell us how to race the Leadville Trail 100 with a power meter. And Jonathan, you've done this before. Tell us about your Leadville power meter experience.
yeah, so this was back in 2019, and I am looking forward. I said after I did it that I would never do it again, and I'm looking forward to doing it again at some point. Not this year with a little baby girl, but in 2019 I did it, and I used a power meter to pace myself. I prior to that really had not done many long races at all. Since then I've done more, but I was quite nervous about pacing it correctly, and going to elevation, it further complicates pacing, no matter how you're pacing. It just makes it really complicated. You think that you feel bad when actually you have more in the tank, or you think that you feel good when you're far beyond your limits. So I used a power meter for that. To give people a context going into this, so for this race, and I typically train at around 5,000 feet in elevation. That's where I live in Reno, Nevada, so that's where it's at. And at 5,000 feet of elevation, my FTP was about 305. So if I was at sea level, it'd be about 320, 325 watts. Okay. So with that sort of FTP going all the way up to Leadville, I chopped that down by 20%. So because when you go up in elevation, you simply can't work that hard. Your work capacity goes down. So it's safe to say more or less you can kind of chop it by 20%. And that's kind of like your starting point for the power.
Is there a way to do a simple rule of thumb algorithm for that? I mean, between 5 and 10,000 feet, you dropped 20%. Is it 4% every 1,000 feet?
It's not linear, frustratingly. We wish it was, but as you go up higher and higher, every foot that you gain, you lose more and more performance. So if you just use your power meter and you said, yeah, I'm going to stick to the numbers that I have at sea level, you're going to blow up before you even get to the point where you descend pipeline, right? Or power line, forgive me. So it's going to be a rough day. So, you can look at it. There's actually a great chart, and I believe it's Joe Friel, perhaps, in his training Bible has this published. It's just, if you're a cyclist and you haven't read, you're curious about training and haven't read it, you really should. Within that, he breaks down like a chart about the effect of aerobic performance or of elevation on aerobic performance. And that, at least for me, tracks very well, that chart. And I've used it many times throughout my racing that I've done. So I looked at it and I said, well, for a race this long, I'd be lucky to maintain something around 70% of my FTP for the day, 75 maybe. That would be really, really good. But I'm going to have to make sure that it's my Leadville FTP that dropped by 20% one instead of me just operating on my sea level or 5,000 foot FTP. So I feel like if you use a power meter, but you're not adjusting your baselines appropriately for elevation, it's just going to get you into trouble. But then again, I guess if you don't pace fastidiously in any way, it's going to get you into trouble. But certainly with a power meter, if you don't adjust for elevation, it could.
So give us an example of a climb for you or a segment for you. What did it look like at Leadville? What would it normally look like? How did that math work out for you?
Yeah, and keep in mind, like when I was looking down at my power meter the whole time, I was like, gosh, why are the numbers so low?
And intellectually, you knew, of course.
Totally.
But there is still something in your gut that you're looking at lower than normal numbers. And I'm not saying this is someone who has done this with power, but I'm talking about just my heart rate.
Totally. And your speed, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All these things that, intellectually.
Yes.
It should be lower. But in your heart,
you have to commit beforehand to not being upset by that stuff, by your speed, by anything else, because you have to formulate the plan when you're not in a crazy head state and then stick to it. So for example, on the first climb going up St. Kevin's, I did 240 watts and I blew, that was way far, that was 20 watts higher than I was planning on doing. I was capping myself at 220 watts for climbs. And then when I was on the flats, I was trying to keep it at 200 watts. Keep in mind, once again, I'm used to doing races like cross-country Olympic races where I was holding 300 watts on flats. And then on climbs, I was doing 350 to 400 watts. So this was a totally different approach. And I'm running numbers that are very low. And if I'm frank, in the first half of the race, even all the way up to Columbine, it just felt easy. But then at the end of that race, my power was not dropping very much. And it was so hard to hold on to those low numbers. And I really did the boiling the frog, death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing, in the sense that it was just little by little, I stuck to those goals. And what felt easy in the beginning felt hard at the end. And it was exactly the right sort of pacing that I needed to do. But boy, it came with shame. Like when I was going up Sugarloaf, people would recognize me and they're like, geez, Coach Jonathan, you're pretty slow, and they're blowing by me on the climb. And then by the time we got to Columbine, I had passed all of them back. And it was because I was sticking to this very strict pacing plan where I wasn't letting myself get too far ahead of myself, with the power targets.
Yeah. So how did you figure out your target wattage for each segment? What did you do there to nail those numbers down?
Yeah, I kind of looked at I basically said what percentage of my FTP is 70%. And then I looked at that number in terms of power and I thought, okay, give myself, 15 to 20 watts wiggle room on either side of that, depending on the circumstances I'm in. And that's what I did. When you get closer to your threshold, you have to shrink that wiggle room. But this is such a long race. You should not be at threshold at this race. Sometimes you'll be forced to, like when you're going up power line and it's so darn steep. But if you can ever control it, you want to be very far away from that sort of power effort. And it's just you holding this stable power that's going to feel too easy in the beginning, but then just hard enough at the end.
I guess what I'm asking was your target power number different on, say, the Kevin's climb than it was going across the pipeline section?
Yes. And the reason for that is because if I'm going up a climb, I do need to put out a bit more power to be able to carry an appropriate amount of speed, because my goal was to get somewhere close to 8 hours. And it was, I think, 8:14 or something like that, my end time. So I knew that I kind of had to maintain a certain speed, and I figured, okay, on the climbs, I'll let myself put out a little bit more power. It also just feels easier to put out power on a climb than it does on the flat. 200 watts on the flat feels harder than 200 watts on a climb for some reason. It's just how we're wired. So anyways, that's how I kind of figured that out and how to split it up. However, it didn't vary from climb to climb, and I think that's important also to keep in mind. If it was a short race, then yeah, you might want to vary your power more from climb to climb. But in this case, you just really have to let the numbers guide if you're using your power meter. So that's why I have my climbing ceiling of power, where I did not want to break that. And if you look at the rest of the climbs, I did a darn good job. I didn't break 220 watts, and I kept it somewhere between 210 and 220 watts for the rest of the climbs. And then in the flat sections, I was between 200 and 210. So, but if you can do that, boy, once again, you'll get mocked maybe by yourself, but it's the thing to do. At the end of the day, it's going to make for a faster day.
For what it's worth, you'll remember, Jonathan, I was one of those people who passed you. We were coming right out of Twin Lakes Stem, outbound. I remember the climb. I remember the place, actually, where I passed you. I was like, here's where I passed Jonathan. And we were both, I forget exactly what my finish time was, but I know that, so I passed you at around mile 42 to 45. You finished about an hour sooner than I did.
Yeah.
It really does go to show that, holding on to your power the way you did, you didn't cook like I did, right? I thought I was like, wow, I am having a banner day. I didn't think in terms of mocking you. I was like, what's wrong with Jonathan? I just thought, look, I just passed Jonathan. I'm having a great day. But I was just, I was giving myself a full head of steam and, paying the price later. You chose to not pay the price, and obviously yielded great results.
It was fun. I that one moment, by the way, when Eldon passed me was so fun. I was hoping that I get to see you because Eldon and I, friends since before then, but I always knew of Eldon's passion for this race. So it was just really cool to have that moment. That's one of the cool parts about this race. I know that has nothing to do with power, but there's a fraternity, so to speak, amongst everybody out there that's just really cool.
As you can tell by Jonathan's power numbers and his experience behind the set of a flat bars, he is an excellent rider. And you probably started in Silver Corral, I would guess, Jonathan, 2019, something like that.
Yeah, gold's the front, right? So as the pros are in something above that.
Gold.
Yeah, so I was in silver. I was right behind him.
You were in silver.
Yeah.
So let's talk to the folks behind you by a couple corrals or more, or even back to white. And many of these folks are out there for the first time. Maybe they've had one Leadville under the belt, and they're thinking about, maybe I want to ride with my power meter. Would you recommend a power meter to somebody who's just got 11 hours in mind or 10 hours in mind?
100%.
Why would you tell them to do that?
I think, actually, something interesting with this, I would recommend those athletes use a power meter more than, Keegan Swenson or Hannah Otto to use them. And the reason for that is because they're so well calibrated, those two athletes that I just mentioned there, the past winners that we had just last year. They're so well calibrated, they're so professional, and they also are very familiar with racing at altitude. As a result, they're able to do this. But for what it's worth, I know that Keegan was racing 100% by his power meter as well. That's just how he executes as well for that race in particular. But the reason for that is because it's a good systems check. Our perception, and we always say that the data that you use for cycling just informs perception. And your perception is totally out of whack when you get into the excitement of a race, especially one as big as Leadville. The energy that you have, the fact that you've built up for this for at least a year, but maybe even more to this race. And then the elevation, the temperature changes, the pack dynamics. There's so many things that will readily and absolutely throw off your perception. So if you don't have a true north, then it's really difficult to know the way to go. And that's what a power meter does. It's something that's just measuring your output. It's not measuring effort. It's not measuring anything else. It's just what work are you doing? So as a result, you can have this grounding metric that will give you an idea of, okay, I am on track. Even though I feel way better than I thought I would at this point, I should still stick to this. Or even though I feel bad right now, I know that I am capable of this. And that's really helpful sort of information to have on a day that's truly like a roller coaster. You'll go through a bit of everything out on that course on that day. So that's why I think it's even more important for athletes that perhaps aren't as familiar with pacing. And the best way to have a shorter day is to have a properly paced and fed day. And so for them in particular, when they're looking at a really long day, it's going to have an even greater impact.
What's your screen choice? Like, do you like average power, 3-second power, 10-second power? What's a good one up there that won't get us too wacky about the fluctuations we might have in power?
Yeah, there's actually, I remember specifically for Leadville, I had just a couple screens. Just a few things on my screen. I had duration, which is very important for me for that 8 hours, right? I had distance because I needed to know when the feeds were coming up. I had crewed once before, but I didn't know the course like the back of my hand. So rather than trying to do constant guessing and just taking up mental headspace throughout that race, I just wanted to know where it was and where my distance was. And then in addition to that, I had my 5-second power, my current power, and then just smooth to 5 seconds like I typically do when I'm outside. But then outside of that, I had my intensity factor for the whole race. An intensity factor is basically what percentage of FTP you're holding for the whole race. And the reason that I like looking at that instead of watts is because it was one less calculation that I had to do. It was easy since I was very focused on holding that 0.7 IF. So I just stuck with that, and that's all I had on my screen. I didn't have heart rate. I didn't have calories. I didn't have anything else because my nutrition plan was something that was very much automated and taken care of separately. And that's all I cared about. Definitely didn't want to see the current elevation too, or elevation gained. That would be rough. So.
That's my favorite number.
Yeah,
I love looking at that. I stare at that number.
You get some all-time scores on that course. That's for sure. They go so high. But yeah.
So you are the most trustable nerd I know. And so, as someone who has not put a power meter on a mountain bike ever, I'm now thinking about one. And probably a lot of our listeners are too. So help me out. What should I put on my mountain bike so that I have a good, reliable power reading in training and racing?
Yeah, I typically use Quark power meters. I find them to just be bulletproof consistent across the board. I can put a Quark on one bike and then get a Quark for a different bike and it's the same. So I really like that. I've heard really good things about the Garmin, what are they called? The Rally pedals, I believe. They're their SPD style power meter pedals. I've heard good things about those as well.
My wife has those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the nice part about that is that you can swap it from bike to bike if you need to, whereas it might be more difficult with something that's wrapped up into a crank spider or something like that. But those are the two that I typically would recommend to folks. But there's quite a few choices. One that I really like for accessibility is 4Eyes. They're a company based out of Canada, and you can send in your crank arm. In most cases, you can send in your existing crank arm, and they will install a power meter onto that crank arm, and then you'll get it back, and they're known to be quite good as well. So that's a really affordable one. I would not fret about single-sided versus dual-sided unless you have a true leg length discrepancy or strength discrepancy, some sort of imbalance. But even then, if it's imbalanced, whatever it is, that's what it is for you. So if you stick with it, it's fine. So single-sided is just fine too. You don't have to spring for something more expensive.
All right, folks, don't listen to the dinosaurs anymore. Listen to Jonathan. Race with your power meter, especially if you're silver or behind silver. So it's a good, Jonathan tends to believe that this is a great way to set up an excellent pacing strategy. And one more time, Jonathan, give us that math again. And let's work from sea level, because I live at sea level. And I'm going to Leadville, and I got my power meter, and I've got my FTP. What's my math to make sure I'm looking at a correct figure for Leadville racing?
Number one, reduce your sea level FTP by 20%. After that, understand that chances are you're only going to be able to pace, if you hold it consistently, about somewhere around 70% of your threshold for the whole race. So just take 70% of your Leadville altitude adjusted FTP, and then you'll have your power goal. Give yourself 10 or 20 watts wiggle room north and south of that, and then you can make sure that you have your climbs and your flats all worked out.
We have been sharing notes with our friend at DNA Cycling, company president Joe Sepulveda, who is doing the Leadville 100 this year. So Joe obviously can pick what he wants for tops and bottoms and vests and all of it.
Yeah, and when it comes to jerseys, Joe is going to be making a game time decision. He's going to pack two jerseys, the Summit and the Shadow.
I like this idea. Take two, get into Leadville, get a feel for the conditions, look at the weather, and then decide. Really fits my personality. Decide not to decide, at least not now.
Decide to decide later. Yeah, makes sense. Here's why Joe is taking those two jerseys. He says he's going to wear the Summit if it's a cool day. It doesn't have a full zip, and in cooler weather, there's no need to fully open your top. It is an insanely comfortable jersey, and it does have 3 back pockets for stashing your fuel and your wrappers. So if we get a warm day, Joe's going to switch to the Shadow jersey. It has a full zip, it's very light, and it comes in white.
Yeah, the heat cannot be discounted at Leadville. It'll be 40 or cooler at the start, but by the time you start heading up Columbine, temps can be reaching 70. And for that last leg, pipeline to the red carpet, the temp may read 75 or even 80, but it will feel much warmer. I'm betting Joe ends up in that Shadow jersey.
Yeah, I feel like you're probably right. If you're having trouble deciding which jersey to wear, get two. Joe's choices, The Summit in the Shadow, are available at dnacycling.com.
Our guest is Coach Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad. The subject is power meters, how to race with one at Leadville, and how to use one in training to mimic what you might feel on race day. While we're talking about power, I wanted to just transition quick to erg mode, which is probably what most of our folks on indoor trainers are using as they start to prepare for Leadville. And the reason why I bring this up is I heard a couple of knuckleheads talking on another podcast recently about erg mode and how erg mode is no good because it really doesn't simulate what might happen in your upcoming event. So Jonathan, tell us about erg mode as it pertains to getting ready for a specific event. What I guess I'm talking about here is, 200 watts on the flats is probably different than 200 watts on a climb due to the type of muscle recruitment involved. Is there anything you can tell us about how we should be using erg mode as we get ready for a specific event, specifically the Leadville Trail 100?
Yeah, I think first off, erg mode has no inherent negative moral value. It is not bad nor good. It just exists. And it can be a really well-utilized tool for the different contexts that you have. Commonly, you'll see a lot of people on erg mode. They'll put it into their big chainring on the road bike up front and their small cog in the back. And then they ride. And the reason that we do that is because it feels like we have more inertia and it makes certain things feel a bit easier when we are putting out power that's challenging for us. Now, if you just only use erg mode in that one single gear, then yeah, you might show up on a race day with super steep climbs where you have no inertia and it might feel different and be tough. That said, it's really important to remember that we're talking about, we're on the measure of more marginal gains rather than significant gains there. You're still doing the work. If you need to do 200 watts, you can still do 200 watts, and that's proven. It just might feel a bit different in that context, but it's really easily solved. All you have to do is drop into a low gear. And when you do that, that flywheel or the simulated flywheel, if you have something like a Tax Neo or something, that will turn more slowly, and it will make it so that for every degree, the 360 degrees of the pedal stroke, for every degree of that, you might have to put out a bit more force and have more muscle contraction present to be able to maintain that power. And that's because there's less inertia spinning that around. So that's really what it comes down to. So you can use erg mode for climbing really effectively. And I think there are certain people that may live, if you live in a flat area without steep climbs or anything like that, I'd argue that erg mode is way better than riding outside to be able to train for something like Columbine or anything else that is really going to have you having no inertia for a very long time. Just pop it into the small gear.
What about simulation, though? Anyhow, I did a little experiment the other day because after listening to these knuckleheads talk, I thought, okay, I'll try simulation mode, and I made a course, right? I made a course and turned it into a workout, yeah, it gave me the feelings of sort of a course. What do you think about simulation mode as far as indoor trainers and getting ready for an event?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a bit of merit to it. I don't think you'd want to simulate Leadville. That'd be a rough day. Although Eldon has done some really long days on the trainer. But the thing about it, if you look at what drives performance, we always talk about this at TrainerRoad, that we train energy systems that you use on the days that matter most to you. And what I mean by that is your body can produce energy in different ways. It has different pathways, or you could think of it like a ship, like I won't call it the Titanic because our fitness won't sink. I don't want you to visualize that for your own fitness. But those big ships, they have multiple engines, right? And the engines kick on, and even they use some engines at different velocities or different something else, and they'll kick on automatically or kick off. And that's kind of how our body works. It has different ways to create energy based on the intensity of what we're doing. And when you talk about preparing yourself for an event, you want to make sure that the energy system that you will be relying upon the most that day is going to be trained very well and robustly enough to be able to handle the demands of the race. This is the most specific way to go about training. And I know it seems ironic. It seems less specific than just doing the same climb over and over and over. I should say it's the most specific and productive way to do it, because that allows you to stress that energy system in greater, more specific ways than you would get by just riding the course over and over. And that may actually end up delivering better gains for you, which yields better performance on race day. So an example of this, let's say you have a course and you have a climb and that climb is 15 minutes long. You could just repeat that and you'd be doing 15-minute climbs, and that's great. But if you're never doing efforts that are longer than 15 minutes, you are missing certain benefits that you could be getting by doing longer threshold intervals. And vice versa, if you are never doing something like VO2 max intervals while you're doing this course, you're likely missing the ability to raise your threshold even greater so that on race day you could go faster. Your body has no clue that it's on a specific climb. It's irrelevant. What your body does know is the amount of work that it has to do, or the rate of work that it has to do to go up something. So if we want to train that rate of work and the amount of work you can do, we have better ways than doing it than just by running you over the same climb over and over.
Well, we see a lot of this on the forums regarding Leadville. I want to simulate the course. I want to check it out. I want to see it first. And I get it. There's a confidence factor there. People want to get the feel for what they're going to be up against. And there's, I don't know if it's a reluctance, but people have not learned to just trust the data and what's before them and the training plans that are before them, and understand that those will carry them through. Even though they're not actually on Columbine, there's a way to hack it. There's a way to get there anyhow. There's a way to get to the top of that massive climb without actually riding it, whether it be simulation mode or going to the climb. And that is by, a good training plan will get you there. I want to circle back to our top topic here, and that is racing with a power meter. Now, Jonathan leaked to us here. You heard it here first that he hopes to go back to Leadville again. So tell us, if you do go, when you do go back, is there anything you would do different about what you did there before, specifically with your power meters, or any other change you'd make there? Is there any other data point you might want to watch? Any other type of training you would do to have an even better day at Leadville?
I think that this sounds silly, but I think that I would go out even easier than I did.
Oh, wow.
On Sugarloaf, I wouldn't have gone at 240 watts. You don't realize how, when you're in the moment, it's easy to lose track of how much race you have ahead of you. And in Leadville in particular, how relatively easy passing is. It's tough to pass at the top of Columbine, but at that point, just fall into the conga line and count your lucky stars that you may get to rest for a little bit. So it's, not the worst thing in the world. But I looking back, I would go even easier. I want to finish Leadville with just the most smooth pacing across the board that you can possibly have. When it's downhill, I will be coasting and tucking. But other than that, I just want to be metronomic because I know that that's going to give me a better result at the end of the day. There's a lot of other things outside of power that I would want to change, but that's for totally different episodes for different days. So
for power then, what if you have somebody a little more advanced on your hands and they're trying to stay with people to get a ride along with a group, right? They want to stay with a group. They're going up Kevin. They're like, God, I'd really like to stay with this group, but I have to leave Jonathan's prescribed, 70% FTP zone. Is there room for that?
That's a tricky question. I actually just zoomed in on my power file from when I got down power line, and then I latched onto a group, and Eldon was in my head. When you get down from the bottom of power line, you've got that long stretch. You want to be with a group. So we started out, and it was a band of merry gentlemen that were very optimistic about the amount of power that they could put out. And I got sucked in for a brief second there. I'm looking, I have my all-time peak power trying to hold on to somebody's wheel from that race, and it was 540 watts, which keep in mind, that's all I did for the whole race.
Alarm bells, violation.
Yep. Which if you're putting out more power than that, except for maybe if you had a sprint finish with somebody at the line, you should not be putting out more power than that at all. You shouldn't even be getting close to that on this course. So that said, I did that and I tried to hold on to it. And for 2 minutes, I did an NP of 250 watts. And then instantly I can see where I dropped that idea really quick because I said, okay, this isn't sustainable for me. I don't know who these athletes are. It might be sustainable for them. And even though I'm really tempted to stay with a group, it's actually going to make me slower by the end of the day. I may lose 1 minute to these people right now. I may lose 3 minutes, but it will cause me, if I stick with them, to lose 35 minutes at the end of the day. So I had to go back to what I knew was right. I trust physiology and I trust science, and that a day that long at elevation, I'm not going to be able to put out 80, 85%, 90% of my FTP. I need to drop it back down to that 70 to 75%. So it's tricky. I think that it's a very good idea to hold with a group if that group is within your power targets, of course. And there are certain situations where, because you rode too hard earlier, you might be riding really easy now, and then a group passes you, but they really aren't going that much faster, but just because you're trying to recover from that hard effort, it will feel like it. And that's when you have to run the gamble. And it's worth trying out maybe just once and seeing if you can hold with them and if it's okay. And it's always fine to skip poles. But look at that power. And then when you're riding with that group, if it has you sitting too high, then do not stay with them.
I bet $50 those guys were going that hard because they were like, we got Jonathan of TrainerRoad here. we got to show him what we got.
It is worth saying that I passed all of them before we got even to Columbine again. So every single one of them.
It is funny the way that it works that way. And I mean, you are definitely the case in point, the case study for holding a certain power and racing your race. I mean, when we had Rose Grant on last season, that was the drum she beat over and over. Everything she did was according to the race that she had planned. And you make a great case for the power meter being a key way to not overestimate, or rather underestimate, what effort you can and should be putting out.
Just do the math first, folks. That's all you got to remember. Do Jonathan's math.
Don't show up with sea level numbers.
Don't go under sea level.
It will not go well.
No.
But it is so hard to stick to the plan, right? I mean, you get out there and, I mean, you know it, I know it, we all know that you go out too hard and it feels glorious in the moment and you pay the price in the second half of the race.
It's true.
It is absolutely true. And yet, you know, I'm going to be doing this hopefully my 25th time. And I know when I am going up Kevens that it is going to be everything I have to not absolutely, you know, launch attacks on everyone I see as I go up Sugarloaf, because I love doing that. I just love the feel of passing people, right?
If you're going for a fast time, this is, in my opinion, and I would argue even science's opinion, of the best way to go about getting a fast time. But if you're not out there to get a fast time, and you're out there for the experience, and you're out there with your friends or your family and you're doing it, then don't sacrifice the experience of the bonding and the time that you would spend together because you just have to stick it, rigidly to those numbers. It all depends on what your goal is for the race, So if I was to do it again, I would think that I would go back, and my goal would be to see how close I could get to 7 hours. I was not well prepared for long events for this one, and I think that if I was prepared for long events, I had just finished cross-country Olympic national championships, so like 90-minute races. I was not ready for something long. So I'd like to think that I could get close to 7 hours, which would be really fun. But if I went back with friends, I probably wouldn't be looking at that power meter. I would just be, riding with them and having a fun day.
So a 7-hour Leadville in 2024 for Jonathan Lee. Everyone, you heard it here first.
Whoa, suddenly got hot in here real fast.
I look forward to, I guess there will not be a me passing you moment in this race. If we're doing that, you're going to be off the front and I will never, ever see you.
Oh, it'd be amazing to be able to do that. That would be really cool.
I would love to see that happen. Again, thanks to Jonathan Lee. Always love having him on the show. If you're looking for a training plan, I cannot say enough good things about TrainerRoad. It has helped me not only get ready for Leadville, but prepare for many, many other events, as well as to recover from a couple of surgeries at this point. TrainerRoad's program is simply to use. Just, put in the race and date, and the TrainerRoad does most of everything else. You still have to do the pedaling, but TrainerRoad tells you how much, how hard, and when.
All right, let's wrap this episode. Again, thanks to Jonathan Lee for his expertise and to the listeners who submitted questions.
Again, we have a Slack channel, leadville.fm/Slack. And we gather questions there. We also gather them at the Facebook Leadville 100 participants page. It's another good place we go looking for your questions.
If you like the show, go to wherever you listen and give us a 5-star rating and write a review. And to see all the ways you can find this independent show, it's at leadville.fm.
Good luck in your riding, your racing, and especially your recovery. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the starting line.